There's a question that's been living rent-free in my head for years. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more it kind of haunts me. It's not about who shot first. It's not about midi-chlorians. It's something bigger, something that cuts right to the heart of the entire Skywalker saga. Did Luke Skywalker ever truly reach his full potential? Think about that for a second. We're talking about the son of Anakin Skywalker, the son of the Chosen One, a guy whose midi-chlorian count was literally off the charts, a guy that Yoda, 800 years old, trained thousands of Jedi, looked at and said, this one, different he is. And yet we spend 6 movies watching him barely scratch the surface. And then sequel trilogy kind of just moves on. So today, we're going to sit down, go through it all, the movies, the novels, the Legends continuity, the canon, and figure out together, was Luke everything he was supposed to be? Or did the galaxy's greatest hope leave something on the table? Let's talk about it. To understand Luke's potential, you first have to understand where it came from. Anakin Skywalker had a midi-chlorian count so high that the Jedi Council had never seen anything like it, not in 1,000 years of records. He was literally prophesied, the one who would bring balance to the Force. And Luke, he inherited every single drop of that. Obi-Wan Kenobi, in A New Hope, saw it immediately. Yoda felt it the moment Luke landed on Dagobah. Even Darth Vader, a man who had felt the Force in thousands of opponents across decades of war, turned to the Emperor and said Luke had abilities the Emperor had not seen. From the Jedi perspective, Luke wasn't just special. He was the next chapter of the most important bloodline in galactic history. And yet, here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. Luke had almost no formal training. Let me put that in perspective. The Jedi of the Old Republic spent years training from childhood. Some started at age 3. They studied for over a decade before even being given a lightsaber for real combat. Obi-Wan Kenobi trained under Qui-Gon Jinn for years. Mace Windu trained practically his whole childhood. Luke, he had maybe a few days with Obi-Wan on the Falcon, a few weeks at most with Yoda on Dagobah, and then he walked into the Emperor's throne room on the Death Star. That's it. That was his preparation, and he still managed to do what he did. Now, a lot of people look at Luke in the original trilogy and say, yeah, okay, he did all right. But I want you to really sit with what he accomplished. In Return of the Jedi, we watch Luke walk into Jabba's palace, probably the most dangerous crime lord in the Outer Rim, and he mind tricks Bib Fortuna without even blinking. He force chokes 2 Gamorrean guards on his way in. He takes on a whole crew of Jabba's hired muscle nearly by himself and briefly goes toe-to-toe with Boba Fett, the galaxy's most feared bounty hunter. All of this on basically no sleep and incomplete training. Then later, in that throne room, he fights Vader again, and this time he wins. He disarms his own father, and then instead of finishing it, instead of doing what the Emperor wanted, he throws his saber away. That moment, that quiet moment where he says, I am a Jedi like my father before me, that wasn't just emotionally powerful. That was the greatest act of Force mastery in the entire saga, because the hardest thing in the Force isn't shooting lightning or lifting rocks, it's controlling yourself, choosing peace over power, love over anger. And in that moment, Luke Skywalker stood at the absolute pinnacle of what a Jedi is supposed to be. So yes, in the original trilogy, Luke reached his potential as a Jedi in spirit. He lived the code when no one else could. But in terms of raw Force ability, he was just getting started. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. And if you haven't read the Legends novels, I promise you, you're missing out on something special. After Return of the Jedi, the old expanded universe, now called Legends, kept telling Luke's story for decades, and the Luke Skywalker that emerges from those pages is something else entirely. He rebuilds the Jedi Order from scratch. He becomes the Grand Master, not just in title, but in every sense of the word. He goes up against threats that would have made Darth Sidious pause. During the Yuuzhan Vong War, in The Unifying Force by James Luceno, Luke achieves something called the state of oneness, where he essentially becomes a living conduit for the Force itself. His lightsaber is described as moving so fast and so perfectly that he might as well have been wielding 20. An opposing Sith Lord watches him do it, and the novel literally acknowledges Luke was the greatest Jedi Master, and he just exposed the absolute limits of his powers. In Dark Tide Onslaught, Luke telekinetically manipulates an actual black hole to destroy enemy weapons. And then there's Abeloth. In the Fate of the Jedi series, Luke faces an ancient reality-bending force entity, something tied to cosmic mythology far beyond anything the Sith or Jedi had ever encountered. And he doesn't just survive. He fights her. He goes beyond shadows, literally leaving physical existence behind to engage on a metaphysical level. Most Jedi would dissolve just standing near Abeloth. Luke turns it into a duel. Oh, and one more. In Jedi Search, there's this quiet, almost poetic moment. Luke needs to cross a lake of lava, and he just walks. The lava refuses to touch his feet. The Force simply burns around him. His father lost everything next to lava on Mustafar. His son tells lava to step aside. That is what Legends Luke became. Not just the most powerful Jedi of his era, but arguably the most powerful Force user in galactic history. That was the ceiling of Luke Skywalker's potential. All right, I have to talk about this. I know some of you have feelings about it, so do I. The sequel trilogy is where this conversation gets complicated. Canon Luke, the one we see in The Last Jedi specifically, is a broken man. He's hiding on an island. He nearly killed his own nephew in a moment of fear. He's given up on the Force, on the Jedi, on hope itself. And look, I understand what Rian Johnson was going for. The idea of a flawed, human Luke who struggled and failed, that's not wrong on its face. Heroes fail. Real people break. But for a lot of fans, and honestly, for me too, it didn't feel true to the character. Luke Skywalker is the guy who reached into the heart of Darth Vader, and found something worth saving. The idea that he'd lose faith over Ben Solo felt off. Mark Hamill himself said he fundamentally disagreed with that interpretation of the character. And yet, and here's where it gets interesting, even in The Last Jedi, Luke does something breathtaking. He sits on Ahch-To and projects a perfect image of himself across the entire galaxy to Crate. He faces down the First Order, buys the Resistance time to escape, outsmarts Kylo Ren, and then quietly, peacefully, just like Obi-Wan before him, becomes one with the Force. That Force projection? In Legends, that ability was called a Force doppelganger, and it was considered one of the rarest, most advanced techniques a Jedi could master. The fact that Luke pulled it off on a galactic scale while sitting still in meditation, eyes closed, is staggering. Even in his most diminished, broken state, Luke Skywalker was still doing things that no Jedi before him had ever done. Okay, so let's bring it home. If you're talking about raw Force power, about everything that his bloodline promised, every ceiling his midichlorians suggested, then honestly, in canon, no. Canon Luke was cut short. His story was compressed, then broken, then ended before we ever got to see him become the grand master he was destined to be. That's a legitimate grief, and I think it's okay to feel it. In Legends, arguably, yes. Legends, Luke became one of the most extraordinary beings the Force ever produced. He walked on lava. He fought cosmic entities. He rebuilt the Jedi Order, not once, but across decades, through wars and betrayals and losses. He reached a state of spiritual oneness that almost no one in Jedi history ever touched. But here's what I keep coming back to, and this is the part that really matters to me. Luke's greatest potential was never about power. It was about the choice he made in that throne room on the Death Star. No weapon, no rage, just love and stillness, and the absolute certainty that his father was still in there, somewhere. That's what Luke Skywalker was built for. Not to be the strongest Force user who ever lived, though he might have been, but be the kindest. And you know what? He reached that potential completely, fully, without question. In a saga full of war and darkness and tragedy, Luke Skywalker was the one who kept choosing to believe in people, in his father, in the galaxy, in the Force itself. That's his legacy. Not a power level, not a list of Force feats. Hope. So, what do you think? Did Luke reach his full potential? Or was he always meant to be something the galaxy never quite let him become? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you guys land on this, especially if you've read the Legends novels. There's so much there that the movies never touched, and it's a conversation worth having. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you subscribe. We talk about Star Wars like this all the time. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.